The sitting's resumed. It's time for questions to the Minister for Communities, and I call Liz Kimmins.
Question 1.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the House will be aware, the scheme of emergency financial assistance was introduced by the Executive in 2007. Its purpose is to provide immediate financial support to households who have suffered from flooding. It is not a compensation scheme, nor does it purport to be one, nor is it intended to replace or displace the assistance that households should receive from their insurers. An immediate payment of £1,000 was made via district councils to provide eligible households with assistance to make their homes habitable as quickly as possible. In Newry, Mourne and Down District Council area, assistance was provided to 119 households during the flooding event in October 2023. My department's Finance Support Service is available for people who find themselves in financial crisis, including those experiencing financial difficulty as a result of disaster, for example, flooding. The service provides financial support through the provision of discretionary support, social fund and universal credit contingency fund. In addition, householders can contact my department's Make the Call service to ensure they're getting all the money and supports they are entitled to. Make the Call offers a telephony service and has a team of community outreach officers who work from regional locations across Northern Ireland to conduct home visits and provide face-to-face assistance and support with benefit claim completion.
I thank the Minister for his answer, although I think it's very disappointing given that the scheme he refers to is 17 years old now and we're dealing with much higher costs, particularly a number of families in my constituency are still out of their homes as a result of the flooding and their inability to get flood cover in their house insurance. So I would ask the Minister if he would review his decision and agree to consider a dedicated financial support scheme like the Department for Economy are doing for businesses in phase 2 to enable people to get back on their feet.
Well, I'm sorry, I haven't made any decision, Mr. Speaker. I'm simply reiterating what support is available there for householders. First of all, can I say I completely understand the frustration that many of her constituents and others will be feeling as a result of the flooding issues that have been felt in her and other constituencies in recent months. Unfortunately, I can only operate, and my department can only operate within the scheme that is currently available. And this scheme does not provide any additional support for the uninsured properties that she mentions. And any changes to the scheme or additional financial support that would be required would necessitate legislation and executive approval.
Ryan Kingston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I wish to ask the Minister for Communities about flood insurance. What initiatives exist to improve the availability and affordability of flood insurance for those who live in properties in flood risk?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I recognise that this is an issue of concern, especially for those that have found themselves having their home flooded in the past and the difficulty that it is in order to secure flood insurance. To that end, Floodry is a joint initiative between the UK Government and insurers, which will run until 2039. And that programme exists to improve the availability and affordability, as the member has said, of flood insurance to those who live in properties in flood risk areas. Every insurer that offers home insurance in the UK pays a levy, and that money is used to fund the flood element of the policy and helps keep premiums down. The member, or indeed any constituent, will be able to check online for eligibility, and I encourage those that are affected in this way to do just that.
Patrick Brown.
Flat rate £1,000 payment is inadequate to cover household damage from flooding in many cases, and that a payment based on actual losses would be preferable?
Well, yes, Mr. Speaker, it's obviously the case that £1,000 will not, in the vast majority of cases, not provide the assistance that's required. That's why insurance is what everybody should have. It's not meant to be a compensation scheme. It's not meant to take the place of insurance. It is there to ensure that there can be that one-off payment that's made hopefully a very quick period of time to help with the initial cost that some people will be facing. That's why we would encourage people, obviously, to have home insurance. That's why that programme, that's the joint initiative between insurers and the UK Government, is in place.
Colin McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Minister, your Permanent Secretary chaired the response to the floods back last November on behalf of the whole ministerial departments. Many of the businesses are desperately waiting on the £100,000, which is to come from another department. But are you aware when that's going to happen? They're crying out for this scheme to be opened.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not aware of when that will be delivered. As the member said, has indicated, that is not a responsibility of this department. If there are any responsibilities that fall under the Department of Communities, I will, of course, look into that and see what can be done. But again, I place on record my sympathy with those who have been affected. It may only be on the news for a few days, but we understand that the impacts last for a long time after, and we want to be able to help where possible to get those businesses back up on their feet as soon as possible.
Honeyford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 2.
Stuart.
Speaker, the Sports Council for Northern Ireland, Sport NI, is a statutory body set up under the Recreation and Youth Service Order 1986. There are no plans to undertake a reform of Sport NI. However, the New Decade New Approach document stated that there will be a review of arm's-length bodies with a view to their rationalisation. While Sport NI is one of the Department for Communities ALBs identified for review, this has not yet been taken forward. As the sponsor department, Communities continues to work in partnership with Sport NI to support the board and executive team to deliver the necessary changes to the organisation which will allow it to deliver effectively for the sports sector in relation to its core functions and within a proper governance framework. Over the last 3 years, Sport NI has issued exchequer funding of almost £39.4 million and lottery funding of just over £17 million. And this funding consisted of grant awards to over 1,900 organisations. This year, Sport NI plans to invest £7.1 million of national lottery funding across 40 sports governing bodies, with an ambition to boost this figure to almost £8 million next year. In addition, my department and Sport NI published a partnership agreement in November 2022, following the launch of the Northern Ireland Code of Good Practice on partnerships between departments and arm's-length bodies. This was the first such agreement between my department and an arm's-length body and demonstrates the commitment of both our bodies to deliver for the sports sector in Northern Ireland. Now, at the request of Sport NI last May, my department has agreed to carry out an independent strategic review of the organisation. The aim of this strategic review is to identify and understand the cause of governance and control issues so that they can be addressed and that the organisation can be stabilised going forward. My department has engaged an independent strategic partner to carry out this review, and the draft report of findings is expected before the end of the financial year. I will take time to consider the findings from the report and assess what further action is required by the department. In any event, the findings of this strategic review will assist Sport NI to identify and address a number of governance concerns and will also help inform the department of the approach required for any future review work as set out in the New Decade New Approach Agreement.
Minister, you might remind your officials that the 2 minutes is a limit, not a target. David Honeyford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for his answer. And it's the first opportunity I've had to wish him well in his new role. This morning there was an announcement, and we've heard of the £50 million commitment from the Irish Government for Casement Park, which I really welcome. And I look forward to future announcements for the UK Government and finally seeing Casement Park built. But can I ask the Minister, has he had any engagement with either the UK Government or the Shared Island Unit in the Taoiseach's office, specifically around increasing the funding also for the sub-regional football stadia and grassroots sport in general?
Minister.
Well, first of all, Mr. Speaker, I will endeavour to keep to the 2 minutes, because I'm sure when you were Minister you would never have dared go over that limit, and I will endeavour to do the same. And I thank the member for his warm words of welcome. I do have a meeting in the diary very soon to meet with the UK Sports Minister as set out in the Government's command paper. I look forward to that meeting to discussing some of the issues raised, because we're all in this chamber aware of really the underfunding of sports facilities right across Northern Ireland, right across all sports. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation to ensure that we do get the adequate resource from the UK Government's funds in order so that we can have new and improve the existing sports facilities in Northern Ireland.
Mike Nesbitt.
Mr. Speaker, and I wish the member well as Minister. As he suggested, this relationship between the Department of Sport and I has migrated from a management statement, financial memorandum, to a partnership agreement. Given that there's now a review underway, what does that tell us about the efficacy of these new partnership arrangements?
Minister.
Well, look, I don't think anybody in here will be surprised at some of the issues that have affected Sport NI over the last number of years, in particular in regards to budget allocations. I think it is important that all those issues are addressed, and the review will look into those as well, because I think we need to have an organisation that is able to deliver the support that is needed to sport and those grassroots facilities as well. And so I look forward to that review being carried out, and we'll see what further action needs to be taken.
Mr. McNulty.
Minister, wonderful news today with 50 million being agreed from the Assured Island Unit for Casement Park. And Minister, I know you're a soccer man, but would you agree to come into Casement Park to the Ulster final in 2027, the newly built Casement Park, supported by Sport NI, of course, and I will reciprocate by going to the Euros in 2028. Wouldn't that be just wonderful, Minister?
Minister.
So, Mr. Speaker, there are obviously a number of issues before we get to that stage. The member will be aware that there are still outstanding issues in terms of the quantum of funding that will be required and the quantum of funding that will be made available. Those are outstanding issues for the department, and we look forward to hearing more about that in due course.
Paula Bradshaw.
Mr. Speaker, I'm committed to ensuring that members of the deaf community have the same rights and opportunities as those in the hearing community and are able to access services in their own language. I am aware that profoundly deaf people consider themselves as part of a cultural and linguistic minority group rather than a disability group, and view their sign language as their language of need. Sign language users, like many other minority language users, cannot necessarily read or understand information on government websites or printed leaflets and various types of literature. One of the most pressing issues to be addressed to ensure accessibility and fuller social integration for the deaf community in Northern Ireland, therefore, is to increase supply of professionally trained and appropriately accredited interpreters. To address the current need for more British Sign Language and Irish Sign Language interpreters, my department is funding Foyle Deaf Association, a deaf-led sign language teaching centre in Londonderry, to provide an interpreter training programme to boost capacity. My officials are also exploring options with the Centre for Translation and Interpreting at Queen's University to provide an academic route to qualification as an interpreter to further increase capacity and expertise and to future-proof a sustainable supply of interpreters. In terms specifically of the legislation, my officials have been engaging with key stakeholders, which include the deaf community and their representatives, to develop the policy to inform the drafting of clauses for legislation. As a result of that consultation, I am pleased to confirm today that I intend to seek executive approval to introduce a sign language bill to the Assembly at the earliest opportunity. I also intend to seek the resources to put in place the infrastructure necessary to deliver on the intent of the legislation.
Ms. Bradshaw.
Minister, and I would wish you well in your new role. Minister, you'll be aware that they were promised this Act in 2003. 21 years that community have been waiting for this, and I would urge you to bring this forward as a high priority within your departmental priorities. Thank you.
I'm grateful to the member, and I share her frustration at the lack of time that has taken to progress this. In the last number of years, we have seen obviously the sign language legislation introduced in the rest of the UK. There's also provision in the Republic of Ireland as well. I believe that this legislation could have a significant, positive and hugely beneficial impact on the deaf community in Northern Ireland. And I look forward to being able to deliver this for those right across Northern Ireland who will benefit, and it certainly is one of my priorities for my time in office.
Colin Gildernew.
And take the opportunity to welcome the Minister to his role, and I look forward to working with you as Chair of Communities. And Minister, would you agree that deaf people have experienced generations of inequality and social exclusion as a result of underinvestment in these sources? And will you commit, and I know you've mentioned there, that the bill that you're laying will include both Irish Sign Language and British Sign Language?
Sir.
Yes, I completely agree with the member that this has affected many people, affected their educational attainment and their economic prospects as well. And I think there are steps that we can take to ensure that we can make that provision and improve those outcomes for people in particular. Northern Ireland, I suppose, is unique in having both users of British Sign Language and Irish Sign Language, and that's broken down roughly 3,500 British Sign Language users and 1,500 Irish Sign Language users. Those are separate languages, of course. Those are not just visual representations of English and Irish. And so, yes, there will be provision made for both in this piece of legislation.
Guy Middleton.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Minister for his announcement today and obviously for his investment in foil as well. Minister, will lessons be learned from other parts of the UK in terms of their legislation to ensure that the legislation that we have implemented here will be effective and that we can learn the lessons, of course, from other areas?
Yes, absolutely. I suppose one benefit, if we can call it that, of being a little bit behind other jurisdictions is that we can learn lessons from their experiences before. So we can look at what has worked and what additional work is still required. But what's really important for me is that we also listen to the deaf community here in Northern Ireland and their concerns as well. And that's what I intend to do as part of an extensive consultation process.
Robbie Butler.
I welcome the Minister's announcement today, and also I'd just like to give the Minister the opportunity to commit to achieving this in this mandate, and also would the Minister be minded to incorporate the UNCRPD in regard to the ambitions with the legislation?
Minister.
To come back on the second point of his question, but yes, my sense certainly around this chamber is that we have support from all parties, and that should make it easier to get the legislation through, and I look forward to support right across the chamber.
Trevor Clark. Question number 4.
Mr. Speaker, implementation of 18 of the 20 proposals to change the housing selection scheme is ongoing. It is being carried out on a 4-phase approach by the Housing Executive with support and oversight from officials within my department. The aim of the proposals is to make the allocations process fairer, more transparent, and ultimately to enable it to work better for people in need. Stage 1 was implemented on the 31st of January 2023. Stage 2, containing the next 5 proposals, is almost complete. I'll provide an update on this stage in due course.
Mr. Clark. And can I thank the Minister for his answer? Will the Minister agree with me that in many instances, while people are intimidated from their homes, in many instances this has been abused in terms of making people's allocation of points more favourable? And in terms of each of those phases, has any consideration been done in terms of the intimidation points to review how those have been allocated?
Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, that is absolutely the case, that intimidation points are being looked at. It's one of the 2 points that weren't progressed in the previous mandate. The previous Minister had asked for additional information, and that research is being carried out. Under the current scheme, those who are subject to intimidation receive 200 points, and I think we can all agree that intimidation, whatever form it takes, is unacceptable, as is the impact that it can have on the wider community. And I can assure you that the immediate personal safety of the applicant will always be addressed first and foremost. But independent research is currently being conducted on this matter. It's due to complete in March 2024 with a view to producing a series of options for the future of these points. I will consider these options, but I've taken on board what the member has said, what many other members have said as well, and look forward then to bringing forward proposals.
Andy Allen.
Can I echo the comments in welcoming the Minister to his post? He's many challenges ahead, and I hope he faces those head on. Minister, the review of the housing selection scheme is vitally important in delivering housing, but I think we'll all accept that the major challenge is the lack of available housing right across the board. So, Minister, can I ask what thought you've given to leveraging FTC within your department to deliver more social and affordable housing?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, obviously it is right that the housing selection scheme it's important that we get that right. But one of the reasons why there is so many difficulties is because we don't have enough housing stock, and that's where there are a lot of difficulties and a lot of people then that are waiting. So I absolutely believe that is an issue that we need to address. We can do that through a number of ways. We need to look at the number of empty homes that we have in Northern Ireland and what we are doing to try and address that issue. We need to look at the model for the housing executive and allow changes to take place so that we can build more houses in Northern Ireland. We need to make sure that we have a greater supply of affordable housing as well for those that are looking to rent or to purchase their own home, and of course looking at opportunities such as FTC as well to see where that can be used in order to build more homes, because so many of the problems that we're facing, the delays that people have in getting housing, is down to a lack of supply, and that's what we need to address.
Mark Durkin.
Speaker, thanks to the Minister for his answers and congratulate him on his new post. The Minister's outlined his intention to make the housing allocations scheme faster and fairer, and obviously one surefire way of doing that is increasing the supply of homes. Could the Minister outline how many homes he intends to deliver over the remainder of this mandate?
Minister.
Well, unfortunately, I'm not able to give those figures because so much of what we will be able to do will be dependent upon budget. And unfortunately, the member will be aware of the very constrained environment that we are in terms of our budget. But he was right to indicate at the start, in order to deal with housing in Northern Ireland, we can't just look at the number of houses that we ourselves are intending to build. We need to make it as easy as possible to build houses, to make homes as affordable as we can, and also to look at other ways for houses to be built, not just directly through money that's available in my own department.
Neil McAllister.
Response so far, and I also wish you good luck in your new role. The Minister will be aware that tackling violence against women and girls requires all departments in the executive to work together, and until the housing allocation scheme is fully implemented, in the meantime, could the Minister commit that one way to do that was to include domestic violence as a form of intimidation in receiving intimidation points?
Minister.
Yes, and as I said to the other members, under the current scheme, those who are subject to intimidation receive 200 points, and the intimidation category is very specific and does not include domestic abuse. Under the current scheme, someone who leaves their home as a result of domestic abuse can be allocated points for homelessness and primary social needs points, or violence or the threat of violence. Now, independent research is being carried out and it is due to be completed, and this will help inform the next stage of the works. But I have a huge degree of sympathy with what the member is saying, and I will be looking into this issue.
Doug Beattie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question 5, please.
Mr. Speaker, in my department's role as statutory planning consultee on archaeological matters, the Historic Environment Division continues to provide advice to the Planning Authority regarding the ancient burial cairn at the summit for Knock Ive. This cairn is protected as a scheduled historic monument. There are several long-running planning matters concerning a wind turbine at this important historic site. These issues remain the responsibility of Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough Council as the relevant planning authority. Over recent years, my department's officials have also undertaken an enhanced quarterly inspection regime to ensure the appropriate ongoing conservation management of the cairn. My department will continue to fulfil its statutory responsibilities to ensure that the scheduled monument at Knock Ive is appropriately protected under relevant legislation.
Mr. Mealy.
Thank you, Minister, and best of luck for you in your new role. People will know that I've been pushing this issue for quite some years now. We simply cannot allow our historical wealth to be destroyed in this manner. So my question is reasonably simple, Minister, if you would be willing, along with the Historical Environments Division, to meet the Save Knock Ive campaign group to discuss bringing this historical site into the care of the Northern Ireland Government.
So, Mr. Speaker, first of all, I understand the frustration that many in that area feel as to the process over the last number of years. The Department for the Environment is responsible for the planning application that was passed. Historical Environment Division weren't consulted. If they had, they would have had something to say about that. Planning Authority responsibility has now transferred to Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough Council, and we're left in a position that is not good for anybody. The current problem that we are facing, I don't believe would have made any difference had the monument already been placed under state care. I think that the response that the Department for Communities under the Historical Environment Division wouldn't have been any different. However, my department remains committed to providing any help and advice that it can in relation to this issue, and if a meeting with either me or my officials would be helpful to discuss what help or advice we can provide, I would of course be happy to do that.
Owen Tennyson.
Mr. Speaker, and I congratulate the Minister on his new position. The Minister has outlined that Armagh, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough Council is the relevant planning authority, but would the Minister agree that, given that the original decision predated the Planning Act, that it is wrong that the burden of this decision is now falling financially solely on ratepayers in that borough?
Minister.
Yeah, I understand the difficulties for the council concerned whenever it now has to take responsibility for a decision that it did not make, but the member will understand it's not an issue for the department, for communities directly, but like I have said, I am willing for HED to get involved in any way it can to provide any help and advice as is necessary, and you may want to address some of those issues to the Department for Infrastructure.
Claire Sugden.
Number 6.
With the Speaker's permission, I'm going to group questions 6 and 8 together. I welcome my colleagues' interest in our local footballing infrastructure, which is badly in need of investment. The facilities used to play football across Northern Ireland at all levels are, in many cases, in poor condition and no longer fit for purpose. I recognise and share the deep frustration of many that this long-standing executive commitment has not yet been delivered. My officials are working closely with clubs at all levels to build strong relationships and understand needs, and are developing proposals in partnership with an advisory working group. I have asked my officials to present me with proposals and options for consideration to take this commitment forward as a matter of priority. Once final proposals are confirmed and approvals are secured, I will be able to provide a timescale for the process to apply for funding. I am committed to delivering this important investment, and I recognise the valuable contribution it can deliver for football and for wider society.
Ms. Sugden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish the Minister well in his portfolio. I also wish that he brings some of that money to Korean Football Club. We've been advocating for this funding for quite a while now. Minister, it seems, or it's expected, that there's not going to be enough money. Are you going to be advocating to the Executive to give more money so that it's not just Korean Football Club who benefits from this funding?
Minister.
I know that Korean Football Club is looking for funding, as are many other clubs, both at Premiership, Championship and grassroots level, and I will absolutely be going back to the Executive looking for more resource.
Mr. Buckley, 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Minister will be aware that Portadown Football Club have been preparing for the redevelopment of Shamrock Park for many years, and I was delighted to see it shortlisted by his department to advance its business case. So can the Minister provide clarity on how his department will be ensuring these clubs who are spade ready are prioritised in funding going forward?
Minister.
Well, I'm delighted that funding was able to be made available so those business cases could be taken forward, and that a number of clubs will be in the position of being well advanced ahead of me giving final consideration to the different options that are going to be coming my way very shortly. But we look forward to analysing all of those cases as they come in. But it is very important that we look at the level of need and the business cases and everything else to make sure everything that is necessary is in place.
That concludes listed questions. Now move to topical questions. Mr. Stewart had to withdraw because he feels unwell, so we move on to number one, Daniel McCrossan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, today is a positive day. €50 million has been pledged by the Irish Government, a solid commitment to the delivery of Casement Park. And sorry, Minister, if maybe it's just not you're having a good day, but you don't seem overly happy or positive about that decision. So, in your response to me in a second, give some energy to this, because Ulster Gaels are very excited about today. This is a good day for football fans, for sport across NI. Would you agree?
Get the question,
Thanks very much.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I said to the member's colleague, sorry, the member's former colleague, as I said to Mr. McNulty, there are a number of outstanding issues, both in terms of the quantum of funding and in terms of the total cost and where that funding is coming from. And I look forward to further clarity on that.
Mr. McCrossan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Minister. But Minister, €50 million is a fantastic start. It's a springboard. Have you had conversations with the Secretary of State or British Government about finding the rest of that money, or executive colleagues indeed? And will you commit to this House that you'll do whatever within your gift to ensure that Casement is delivered?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have to be honest with the House and say that it is not going to be within my gift. This is outside of the control of any one department or outside of the control of the Northern Ireland Executive. I have explained to the member the difficulties that exist around uncertainty in terms of cost, uncertainty in terms of funding. But I can commit that I will provide that information to the House as soon as I can.
And I'll join the others when welcoming you, Minister, to the Department for Communities, the best department, if I may say. But I will ask the Minister, have you any plans in this mandate to deliver a national strategy on retrofitting that will take community-based area approach to include options for social housing?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I have indicated in my previous answers, I believe that we do need to see improvement in terms of our housing, not just in the number of houses that we have in Northern Ireland, but the quality of some of our housing as well. And we see that. I don't think a single MLA in here who's in touch with their constituency doesn't get complaints and concerns, justified complaints and concerns from their constituents. As I've said, and this may indeed be a frequent refrain from me, we are living in a very tight budgetary environment, but that's why we also need to look at alternative funding measures.
Ms. McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for his answer, and I really look forward to that. Recently I met with Bayview Contracts, a fantastic company in Newry who have been delivering retrofitting in the south of Ireland. Actually, what's interesting for me is when you talk about external funding, one of the routes to that external funding is making a decision on whether we go for BEAR rating, the building regulations rating, or the EPC rating. Has the Minister had any chance in a short tenure with communities to have a think about that?
Minister.
Short answer is no, but I'm certainly happy to find out more.
Neil McAllister.
Aware that last year over 3 families had their discretionary housing payments removed. These families, often without security of tenancy, who will then go on to waiting lists and exacerbate the housing crisis in all of our constituencies. Will the Minister today commit that there will be an equality impact assessment before any more cuts are made to services on the most vulnerable in our society?
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I say at the outset, my job is to protect the most vulnerable in society, and there are many different ways in which I can do this. Within this portfolio, I have also committed to looking at where we are spending our resource and to make sure that we spend every pound that we have in the way that makes the greatest impact upon people in Northern Ireland. I wasn't aware of the exact figure that you had quoted to me, but I am more than happy to look at it and come back to you.
In that case, Minister, might I be cheeky then and ask if you would consider reversing that decision that was made, subject to a business case made to the Department of Finance, because it is the most vulnerable in society that continue to be affected?
Mr. Speaker, I will of course look at that, and if the member would like to meet with me, I'd be happy to offer a meeting to discuss.
Buchanan.
Thank you, Minister. The Arts Council back in October had a scheme for bands instruments. I understand the demand was very, very high. Can you provide me with an update on this funding stream, please?
Yes, I can, Mr. Speaker, because Cheryl Brownlee has already been asking me this question, so I can confirm to him that there were a total of 475 applications to the Arts Council of Northern Ireland's 23-24 musical instruments programme. A total of 296 of these applications met the eligibility conditions of the programme, and of these, 43 were successful.
Mr. Buchanan.
Thank you for that answer, Minister. Based on your numbers you've just provided, can you provide assurance to those that were unsuccessful based on the high demand, due to the limited budget, that this budget will be looked at accordingly, and the process for getting this funding? It's one of the most difficult processes out there for any funding stream.
Well, to make a couple of points, Mr. Speaker. First of all, it was clearly oversubscribed, massively oversubscribed. So I think that does necessitate us to look at it again and see if we are able to provide more funding. And I think it would be a fantastic programme to allocate more funding to. I also note what the member said in terms of how complicated this application process was. Often these are volunteers that are filling out these forms. They have huge pressures on their own time. They're maybe not used to filling in applications like this. Many of them maybe filled them in for the first time. I know I helped many people fill the forms in. Other MLAs will have done the same. So I do think it is important that whenever people are applying for funding, we make it as straightforward and as simple as possible. And if the member has concerns, I would encourage him to send those to me, and I will certainly look at how we can make application processes in the future as simple as they can be, not just for the Arts Councils, but for the other bodies under the remit of this department.
Mr. Stewart's withdrawn. Mr. Cullinan is not in their place. Paul first.
Housing is very important, Minister. Can you outline your priorities with regards to housing during your term in office, and how it will impact positively in my constituency of North Antrim?
Yes, absolutely. And first of all, I would say that housing is a priority. I don't think anyone can come into this department and say that it's not. But as I have outlined, there are a number of things that I think that we can do to improve housing in Northern Ireland. But I would, of course, first say this. This is a hugely important impact upon the lives of people. If someone has a warm home to live in, it gives them huge advantages moving forward, a safe place to live. Too many children are growing up without the security of a home. Far too many people are in temporary accommodation, being moved from place to place every few weeks or every few months. Too many people are having to move away from where they're living as well. So, as I've outlined already, I want to make sure that we are looking at those empty homes in Northern Ireland. Scotland and Wales have actually taken initiatives to ensure that they can tackle those high number of empty homes that existed there, and some with considerable success. What we also need to do is look at the funding model for the housing executive, and importantly, and this will require a cross-departmental approach, but look at planning, look at where we build our houses, how we build our houses, making sure that we have the infrastructure in place so that we can make housing as affordable as possible, and allow people to get on the housing ladder. Those are some of the things that I hope to tackle during my time in office.
I thank the Minister for his answer. he'll know and he'll live through the issues around the contracts with the housing executive over the last summer. Minister, can you assure this House that you'll do everything in your power to try and resolve those so that when contracts ends and new contracts are renewed, that there's not this massive gap which impacts on not only the maintenance of houses but housing allocation?
Minister.
Yes, I absolutely can, Mr. Speaker.
Down Dodds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, many churches in my Upper Bann constituency provide not just spiritual support but practical support to their communities. The House of Good report commissioned by the National Churches Trust indicated that for every £10 spent there was a return of £37.50. And you will be aware, Minister, of the difficulty there is in having faith-based organisations funded. Have you any plans to address this issue, and how quickly can we do it?
Minister.
I'm grateful to the member for her question. I absolutely agree with what she has said in terms of the impact that church and faith-based organisations can have right across Northern Ireland. In fact, I'm sure we all see it in our own constituencies, whatever background you come from, whatever faith or none that you might have. We can see the impact that has, especially among children and young people in particular. I have been approached by a number of people in recent years saying how difficult it is for some faith-based groups to get funding. And quite simply, I don't believe that anyone should be discriminated against on the basis of their faith or religion.
Ms Dodds.
Thank you, Minister. I indeed look forward to working with you to realising how we can actually address this issue, because I do think of, for example, Emmanuel Church in Lurgan, the counselling services, etc. they provide, and they're very, very important, and would invite you to come down and discuss the matter with them.
Mr. Speaker, I would be delighted to join the member in her constituency and engage with those faith-based organisations, and I hope by doing so I can highlight some of the work that they have done, often those unsung heroes that contribute hugely to people's lives right across Northern Ireland.
To the comments made in wishing the Minister good luck on his new post. Can I ask the Minister if at long last we are any closer to seeing the local and regenerational powers transferred to local councils?
Well, Mr. Speaker, that would be a cross-cutting issue and therefore one for the Executive.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well then, Mr. Speaker, on something more specific, if I could ask that 10 years after the formation of the so-called super councils being created, are there any plans to review the structures and mechanisms around those councils which may, for example, be blocking the bringing forward of local development plans this far down the line?
Mr. Speaker, you'll hopefully forgive me in not being just over exactly what the member's raising in relation to that. I know that there are a number of issues waiting for me in terms of the local government group within my department, and a few different issues which I will be taking on, but in relation to local development plans, that's something I'm going to have to come back to in writing.
And welcome the Minister and wish him well in his role. The Minister knows how important the rate support grant has been to local councils, particularly in the least well-off area. Can I ask him if he plans to reinstate it?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the rate support grant is a statutory discretionary in amount but is not ring-fenced, and if any further funding becomes available for the current financial year, I will consider the funding for councils in the context of my department's overall budget priorities. The budget for 24-25, as you'll be aware, hasn't been agreed yet by the Executive, and therefore I'm unable at this stage to confirm any funding for councils for the next financial year.
Thank you, Minister. Can I ask you if you would place in a business case on record for that?
Mr. Speaker, this is discretionary in amount, and all of the decisions around the rate support grant will be entirely dependent upon the budget allocations that are provided to me and the decisions that come from that.
Questions. I commend you, Minister. You got through all of the topical questions, so you'll be congratulated for that. If members would just take their ease, there's an urgent oral question, and there's a change at the top table. I'm going to conduct the urgent oral. So